Hey guys, we're going to continue with our reading of Auggie and Me. We were about halfway through the book before things got a little crazy. The last stop and jot I have in my notebook was March the 12th. And just to give a quick recap, I have that Chris revealed that his parents are getting a divorce. Chris and his dad were going to the hospital to pick up Chris's mom, who had been in a car accident. And she had a broken leg, but that she was going to be okay. And if you recall, Chris was upset that mom didn't come to the school that day to drop stuff off for him. And you guys can, I know you don't have your reading journals at home, but you can just start a new journal or start a piece of paper. Your entry date for today's reading is going to be March the 20th. And the cool thing is that you can pause your video to do your stop and jots whenever you want to. So this chapter begins, the hospital visit. The first and only time I'd ever been to a hospital before was to visit Auggie. This was when we were about 6 years old. Auggie had had like a million surgeries before then, but this was the first time my mom thought I was old enough to go visit him. The surgery had been to remove the buttonhole on his neck. This is what he used to call his trach tube, a little plastic thingy that was literally inserted into his neck below his Adam's apple. The buttonhole is what the doctors put inside Auggie when he was born to allow him to breathe. The doctors were removing it now, because they were pretty sure Auggie couldn't breathe on his own. Auggie was really excited about this surgery. He hated his buttonhole. And when I say he hated it, I mean he hated it. He hated that it was so noticeable, since he wasn't allowed to cover it up. He hated that he couldn't go swimming in a pool because of it. Most of all, he hated how sometimes it would get blocked up for no reason, and he would start to cough like he was choking, like he couldn't breathe. Then Isabel or Nate would have to jab a tube into the hole to suction it so that he could breathe again. I watched this happen a couple of times, and it was pretty scary. I remember I was really happy about visiting Auggie after his surgery. The hospital was downtown, and Mom surprised me by stopping off at FAO Schwartz so I could pick out a nice big present to bring to Auggie, a Star Wars Lego set, and a small present for me, an Ewok plushie. After we bought the toys, Mom and I got lunch at my favorite restaurant, which makes the best foot-long hot dogs and iced hot chocolate milkshakes on the planet. And then after lunch, we went to the hospital. Chris, there are going to be other kids who are having facial surgeries, Mom told me quietly as we walked through the hospital doors. Like Auggie's friend Hudson, okay? Remember not to stare. I would never stare, I answered. I hate when kids stare at Auggie, Mommy. As we walked down the hall to Auggie's room, I remember seeing lots of balloons everywhere, and posters of Disney princesses and superheroes taped to the hallway walls. I thought it was cool. It felt like a giant birthday party. I peeked into some of the hospital rooms as we passed, and that's when I realized what my mom meant. These were kids like Auggie. Not that they looked like him, though a couple of them did, but they had other facial differences. Some of them had bandages on their faces. One girl I saw quickly had a huge lump on her cheek that was the size of a lemon. I squeezed my mom's hand and remembered not to stare. So I looked down at my feet as we walked and held on tight to my Ewok plushie. When we reached Auggie's room, I was glad to see that Isabel and Via were already there. They both came over to the door when they saw us and kissed us hello happily. They walked us over to Auggie, who was in the bed by the window. As we passed the bed closest to the door, I got the impression that Isabel was trying to block me from looking at the kid lying in that bed. So I took a quick peek behind me after we had passed. The boy in the bed, who was probably only about 4, was watching me. Under his nose, where the top of his mouth was supposed to be, was an enormous red hole. And inside the hole was what looked like a piece of raw meat. There seemed to be teeth stuck into the meat, and pieces of jagged skin hanging over the hole. I looked away as quickly as I could. Auggie was asleep. He seemed so tiny in the big hospital bed. His neck was wrapped in white gauze, and there was blood on the gauze. He had some tubes sticking out of his arm and one sticking into his nose. His mouth was wide open and his tongue was kind of hanging out of his mouth onto his chin. It looked a little yellow and was all dried up. I've never seen Auggie asleep before, but I'd never seen him sleep like... I've seen Auggie asleep before, but I had never seen him sleep like that before. I heard my mom and Isabel talking about the surgery in their quiet voices, which they used when they didn't want me or Auggie to hear what they were saying. Something about complications and how it had been touch and go for a while. My mom hugged Isabel and I stopped listening. I stared at Auggie, wishing he would close his mouth in his sleep. Via came over and stood next to me. She was about 10 years old then. "It was nice of you to come and visit, Auggie," she said. I nodded. "Is he going to die?" I whispered. "No," she whispered back. "Why is he bleeding?" I asked. "It's where they operated on him," she answered. "It'll heal." I nodded. "Why is his mouth open?" "He can't help it." "What's wrong with the little boy in the other bed?" "He's from Bangladesh. He has a cleft lip and palate. His parents sent him here to have surgery. He doesn't speak any English."